Welcome in to another new podcast from Coatings Pro Magazine. As always, I'm your host, Ben Dubose, news editor with the AMP Publications team. Today, I'm joined by Alex Correa, CEO of Graphene. He's going to be helping us discuss some of the innovative work their company's doing with graphene in industries such as coatings, concrete, elastomers, polymers, lubricants, you name it. This Brazilian nanotechnology company specializes in advanced graphene enhanced materials for industrial applications. Recently, they've also announced the commercial availability of two new additives that were specially formulated for waterborne paints and coatings. These additives deliver strong coverage, durability, while also minimizing environmental impacts. This can reduce or eliminate the need for some traditional manufacturing input, as well as additives and processes. And then by doing so, you lower the production cost. Alex, thanks so much for taking the time. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Len, for the introduction and also for
Yeah,
having us at the show.
absolutely. I'll let you expand upon that a little bit. For anyone that's not familiar with you or Gerdau Graphene, just give us a little bit of your history in the industry and what the company's been doing the last couple of years.
Great. So again, an honor joining you here and opportunity to speak a little bit. So I come from an ambidextrous, let's say, career. So working different roles in supply chain and product development, market development in different industries. I like to kind of separate the career, let's say, in two phases. The first phase in basically consumer goods and apparel, kind of honing these skills. But in the past 10 years, I've been working on several entrepreneurship projects. So basically, how to bring advanced materials, new materials to the market, and working within large corporations. So basically, how to build spin-offs or new business ventures from these new materials to really bring them quickly to the industry, right? So the past since 2020, I'm working in Gerdau, as you mentioned. So for the folks who don't know, Gerdau was one of the largest steel producers in the Americas. It's a Brazilian-based company, but we have operations anywhere from Canada all the way down to Argentina, so in all the countries in the region. Most of the operations are in the U.S. and Brazil, so also a large, say, footprint in North America. It's a company which has 120 years, over 120 years of tradition, right? And recently, we've been really looking on advanced materials. So basically, in the midst of the pandemic in 2020, we started looking at how to grow the company, and we saw we could go so far if we only invested in steel. And we decided to make a whole program called Gerdau Next to invest in adjacent businesses, right? So how to really invest in new materials. And then within the different investment thesis we had, we were looking in advanced materials, how to invest in new materials. And that's how Gerdau Graphene was kind of founded, right? So it was a first spin-off from this program. So I've been working as the CEO of Gerdau Graphene since then. And basically, we are, as you mentioned, a nanotechnology company, an additive company. Basically bringing additives based with graphene or say graphitic materials, right, to different industries, right, to the coatings industry, one of the largest routes we're looking into, but also say polymers or plastics in general, elastomers, right, and lubricants and the cement and cementitious materials.
So tell us at a high level about the history of nanomaterials and then specifically graphene for use in the coatings market, because I know it's relatively new. Just talk, if you could, about the origins of this and how it's progressed so far.
Okay, for sure. So the use of nanomaterials in the coatings industry is already has a long history. It's very quite common now, let's say, right? So your binders, right, your colloidal compounds already nanometers today. So silica also something quite is used, right? Silver and titanium oxide. So it's something that's been used a long time now, ready to bring, let's say, enhanced functionalities. But I think what is quite new to the industry or to the not only to the coatings market, but the market overall is the use of graphene, right, or graphitic materials, right? So I think carbon black has been used for a while now, but say graphene is quite a very key premium, say, material, quite different from carbon black, right? So the history of graphene basically until 2004, people found that graphene was something quite impossible to achieve, right? It was believed to be some like a kind of a more of a product found in books, not in real life, right? And in 2004, two physicists from Manchester University were able to isolate the material for the first time. That gave them the Nobel Award for Physics, right? For a couple of years later, right? And since then, people have been trying to really put this into the market, right? So it's a quite young material. Let's say adolescent, let's say a little bit less than 20 years since it was formed for the first time. Most of the history of graphene in the past years has been how to produce graphene in scale and at a reasonable cost, right? So most of the first, let's say, 10 years have been really up to 2017 actually, how to actually bring this to the market. So most of the companies were founded on technologies how to produce graphene. And these last, let's say, 5 years has seen a lot of, let's say, momentum now on how really to do applications with graphene, really. So how do we get graphene commercially on products, right? And I think the real challenge there is you're talking about a material that on one side is extremely flexible. It has several different applications, which is very nice on one side, but really how to really hone it to one specific market, one specific application functionality is always a challenge, right? And it's a material really that it has a very, very small percentage you add to a product, right? Just so to give you kind of a sense of that. So we would say that by the dimension of graphene, a gram of graphene would have the area of a football stadium, right? So what I like to comment is you can easily see a gram of product in a water bottle or in a bucket of paint. But you think about a football stadium inside those products, it's huge, right? So it will give you trouble, right? So basically, you're talking about applying something from 0.01, 0.04 to 0.5% of graphene in mass or in products, right? Anything above that will actually give you a down effect, right? So it's probably so one of the key challenges which the industry has been facing is how to dose such small levels of material. But one of the key benefits is with a very small dosage, you have a huge gain, right? So it's this really, the benefit comes from very small quantities giving you a huge performance gain, a huge overall product improvement, right? So I think talk about the history again. We see a lot of progress now recently in really having the industry knowing how to apply it. We see the first products going commercial. The end industries, the end clients, see the benefits really of using graphene now on the market. So it's something that's beginning to pick up, and probably in the next 5-10 years, we'll see this more and more in our day-to-day lives, right? So.
What are really the performance improvements on the technical side? I know you've gone into that a bit already, but just explain in layman's terms, if you could, what adding graphene to these coatings can do in terms of their technical performance and why this is worthy of such investment and exploration.
Okay, yeah. So we usually like to kind of summarize the graphene benefits in 5 main areas, and I think there are 3 to 4 which are very key for coatings, right? So the first one is graphene is a great component to add protection or durability to materials, right? So graphene really is a very good component to add an anti-abrasive property, anti-corrosive, anti-fouling property, so overall mechanical protection, which in the end will allow the end product to have a longer durability, right? So lasting longer. You're having less usage in a way, or you're having a more sustainable kind of application. That's one key element, right? That graphene will provide. When you talk about the application in coatings, really, again, it's a key element. We already have products on the market here in Brazil, which graphene will give you a longer lasting coating, right? So it'll last longer against abrasion, against kind of other elements. The other one is a whole story about down gauging or material reduction, right? So we see this in several different applications. In the case of coating specifically, it has a twist to it that will really allow you to down gauge harmful substances, while you have more sustainable materials in the painting, right? So just to give you some references of what we've seen and what we're working with here in Brazil and also in the US is something like 0.04% of graphene on a concrete will allow you to remove 30% of the cement and 10% of the water of the concrete. So you put 0.04% of graphene in mass, and you have 4% less mass of material of the same resistance in concrete, right? When you go to plastics, today we're talking about 0.5% of graphene will allow you to reduce 30% of the mass of plastics and packaging. And coatings, what we see because of the nature of the coating is it's a little bit twisted. That basically, graphene will allow you to not down gauge necessary materials, but really shift materials. So you can have maintenance product, a protective coating, which is water-based instead of solvent-based. So you can have much lower use of heavy metals in protective coatings, right? So, for example, we're talking about having the galvanization, a zinc-less galvanization process, right? So like how can you have the same protection that you'd have with more harmful materials by using graphene? So again, it's all about, in this way, not really down gauging, but substituting material basis to more stable materials, right? The other, I think, great effect are barrier properties. So graphene is a huge component to give you an UV protection. thermal protection. So you're talking about really having fire retardant
Yeah.
coatings, right? So basically anti-static paint. So it's a whole layer of protection. We've already seen this also in the market, special coatings for, let's say, protective clothing that will give you like a protection to bacteria, to viruses.
Hmm.
Several masks or materials in the North America during the COVID were done with graphene to really help the protection against the COVID virus, right?
Hmm.
And then finally, you can have some special properties, right? For example, graphene is a great material to make conductive inks, right? So graphene gives you a good conductivity to materials, right? So I think the key benefit, talk about the coatings industry, is really this multifunctional aspect of graphene, right? If you talk about the coatings market, the main, I think, value proposition of the coatings market is how do you provide protection and aesthetics with the
Hmm.
lowest environmental impact possible, right? And if you look into the history of the coatings market, really what's the market is demanding more and more is how do you have multifunctional products and how do you bring more efficiency to both the industry itself, right, by having to use less additives, have a better, say, manufacturing process, but also how do you bring efficiency to the end user by having products that will last longer, products that will have multifunctional aspects. And then graphene really can come as an ingredient, as an additive that will provide you these gains, right? It will give you
Hmm.
one or two functionalities, so you can really substitute different additives. It is a very sustainable source material, and it can also remove more impactful materials, right?
Hmm.
At the same time, it can give you also a boost in the industrial process. It's really the beauty of graphene and why it's so disruptive for the coatings
Yeah.
industry, and other industries, of course, right?
So when we talk about challenges for graphene, one of the things that we've heard a lot over the last decade is about scalability. You
Yeah.
referenced that earlier. How has that improved in recent years, and what needs to happen for these graphene technologies within coatings to continue to be more scalable to where you're in a better position for widespread adoption?
Okay, so I think that the key challenge is you don't have the scale today because you don't have the market, right? So I think that the main challenge is the market has to be developed first, and I think then the industry will
Okay.
follow with scale, right? And then the reason why that hasn't happened is really the whole application story, right? So I think what we see today is basically you have on one side all these new companies which were founded on producing graphene,
Hmm.
and their main drive has been producing graphene, period, right? And then they in a way would wish that the end customer will find a way to apply it, right?
Hmm.
And then we think about graphene again. It's a very so you can sell this in say basically powder form or liquid
Hmm.
dispersion, right? So when you look at the powder form, for example, in a way it's such a fine material that if you were to open a bag of graphene, you probably kind of it would take a long time to even fall down the floor, kind of float. So how can you put that in a factory, right? How can you apply 0.05% of a material in a coatings line, right? So the challenge has been that the industry has been producing the product per se, and not thinking of how to apply it, right? So, and then in the end consumer is not going to have the technology of doing the additives, right? So kind of you
Hmm.
have these two sides of the business just waiting the market to kind of happen.
Hmm.
When we looked at the market in 2020, we saw that challenge. That's why we built Graphene really on it's a chemical company focused on doing these additives. I think what we need more and more companies like ourselves, which are producing additives or
Hmm.
solutions which have graphene, a graphene construct in a way that allows it to be as plug and play as possible. So the whole
Hmm.
challenge is how can you make new families of additives to have graphene on them in a way that I can take an additive today from the market with a substitute of a graphene additive easily in industry. So we see this happening now. I think we're the first companies to start doing this on a more commercial level. We see more companies on that movement. So I think that this really should speed up the adoption of the material, right? That's I think,
Hmm.
and there's also a whole challenge chemically there because on one side graphene is very versatile to be used, but then I think people have to think of this as a system, right? I think the industry has to think as graphene a system, and really, how do you build again an additive chemically, which has components that are very
Hmm.
well versed for your coating, for your end material, but at the same time are really anchoring graphene there to make sure that
Hmm.
it's and homogeneous. So again, we have been driving this movement, and we see more and more companies now, instead of just producing graphene by itself, producing graphene enhanced materials to facilitate the adoption. So I think it's the main challenge in the industry. On top of that, also there's a whole educational challenge. Like with any new material, many people I think have heard of graphene, kind of know what it is,
Hmm.
but if you go to product development or R&D teams within large companies or users, they
Hmm.
still don't have a very in-depth knowledge of what the benefits that can be provided by graphene, how to apply it. So I think as the industry itself has to really help say educate these end users and industries of what's the best way of applying graphene, what the benefits that can happen. So again, we see this movement happening more and more, which I think kind of bring the market to a mature level. And once that's done, the supply side will follow. I think there is today technology well developed enough that there can be volumes of graphene supplied to the market at the right pricing. It just hasn't happened because we still have this
Hmm.
market development part kind of
Yep.
cooking and really picking up speed, right? So
That leads perfectly into my next question, which
okay,
is about the application, because at Coatings Pro, we deal with applicators. We are the
yeah,
voice of the contractor. And so a large portion of our audience are people who aren't necessarily involved in terms of manufacturing the material. They're involved instead with the end application.
okay,
So what are some of the differences when we talk about graphene enhanced coatings in terms of what it means for the end application? Think in terms of, working windows, application
okay.
tools. Just give us an example or two of how, or the criteria that I guess you need to be considering if you're an applicator looking to actually install one of these graphene enhanced coatings in the field.
For sure. So and I think that's something we've been also working very strongly on our product developments, how to really
Hmm.
understand the end user and see the benefit we can bring from them that comes from our background also Dow. So I think the to give you a few examples of what we already have commercially available. So we launched a paint brand last year in Brazil, which basically the floor paint. So talking about this architectural
Hmm.
standard architectural floor paint, right, has graphene inside. And basically, the benefit we have in our playground has been basically the Gerdau steel mills. So for the past
Yes.
over a year, we've been painting 16 steel plants in Brazil, right? So we talk about very, I'd say, aggressive environment. So you're talking about environment which has right
Hmm.
chemicals and heat and a lot of movement. So basically, imagine you typically have this an area of a lot of movement of trucks and vehicles and people, like the floor
Hmm.
of your factory, which is scrubbed daily, right? So
Yep.
very abrasive environment, open to the air with rain and sun here in Brazil, right? Basically, what we saw this last year, over a year painting these floors, is basically with graphene, we usually will have to paint the floor every 3 times a year, right?
Okay.
And basically now the paint lasts so much longer, it's much more
Hmm.
durable that you have to paint it twice.
Hmm.
On top of that, right, we typically would have three, let's say, coats of paint, right? We apply the paint 3 times on the floor to make it, say, adhere correctly and have the right aesthetics we'd like. With graphene, we only have to apply twice, 2 coatings, right?
Hmm.
So basically, you have a third less application, right, in terms of material with lasting. You have to pay twice a year instead of 3 times. So back to your question, if I'm an applicator, basically the downtime or the amount of labor I have to use to apply that paint now is substantially reduced, right? So if you talk about a factory, the biggest cost in painting your floor, your factory is not the paint itself, is the time you have to have the factory idle to actually paint the floor, right? So if I have to do this one time less during the year, and the job is much quicker because I'm applying a third less material, uh, the savings or the productivity is huge, right? Of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're also using less paint, which is very nice, right? And it's also more sustainable. But on top of that, I mean, the whole application process is much simpler, right? We've been also selling this paint now to large construction companies in Brazil for buildings, right? Commercial buildings, residential buildings, and also for say doing the maintenance of those. And we see the same benefits, right? So I think for the applicator, it's a huge benefit.
Yep.
We are also now launching second half solvent-based heavy maintenance, light maintenance products, and basically what we're going to bring to market are products that have a much better resistance to corrosion, right? So again,
Hmm.
benefit there is you can have also a product that lasts longer, requires less maintenance, less intervention on the product. So I think there are some very interesting functionality performance gains, but from the applicator side, I think the main benefit is really
Yeah.
having a much more efficient process. Graphene allow a much more efficient process in terms of the application of these
Yeah.
paints.
In terms of building out the market, I'm sure it goes back to the education component. when we're
Yeah,
talking to customers or contractors, it's not just about the upfront cost. It's also when we look at the overall cost equation, how if you reduce the amount of labor that goes
exactly.
into, not just a given project, but protecting an asset over the long haul and how often you have to do it, then that's part of the cost equation. And getting people to understand that is part of that education mission that you talked about earlier. I think when we look to the future, and clearly education is a big part of it. You laid that out very well in terms of how you develop the market moving forward and try to make this more economically scalable to where this can work at the level that clearly you all at Gerdau Graphene hope and believe that it can. Are there any key benchmarks or inflection points that you're looking at over the next few years as far as, I don't know, I don't want to say a turning point because clearly there's momentum already, but is there anything to watch for in terms of, I guess, a key development on the horizon that might accelerate things for graphene enhanced materials and obviously the coatings market, because that's what we cover,
Yeah.
but beyond as well?
I think so. Again, first, I think key, say, milestones or benchmarks are really seeing commercial increase of commercial use, right? So I
Hmm.
think today we have, for example, two brands in Brazil already with these coatings. We probably have a third and fourth coming up soon. So it's how do we see more and more increasing market share of products with graphene? Because I think that
Yep.
really helps
Yep.
people understand that graphene inside products have a benefit, right? So I think we talk about the educational side. It is a challenge to explain the product itself, but it's also sometimes a challenge to tell people that you can use, say, 30% less material and less 30% more. These concepts are
Hmm.
kind of, we're just one element of different additives. So really seeing is believing. So as we see more and more products with from different platforms or different companies going to the market, this I think really helps to make people really understand the value and increase. That's like a big milestone, I
Hmm.
think. The other one is as we start seeing, say, more and more uh, say products being designed or honed, formulas being designed and honed for
Hmm.
graphene. So today, I think there's a push from the industry, the graphene industry, to try to help the end markets apply these additives to their market. I think once we start seeing companies really designing products based on graphene properties, I think that's another important hurdle we'll see of really increasing the value of graphene and the speed of graphene to the market. And I think once that happens, another important milestone is seeing really the overall uh, volume, the number of companies or the volume of
Hmm.
graphene being produced globally increase. I think that really is important. As I said today, uh, you have several companies, but a smaller volume, so that kind of
Hmm.
people are still a bit, say, they're still waiting for the movement to happen. Once you start seeing large
Gotcha.
companies getting volume, I think that really adds the credibility of the component in the market, right? So.
We're winding down now with Alex Correa, CEO of Gerdau Graphene. As far as everything that's on the horizon for you all, I know you're a busy company, but just give us a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. Is there any particular project or technology, or perhaps a couple of them, that are huge points of emphasis for you guys over the remainder of 2023 and I guess looking to 2024?
For sure. So again, we are looking at different, say, end markets. So coatings for sure is one, and I think we spoke a lot about that. So I think
Hmm.
our next key development this year, next year, is entering to industrial paints, really protective paints, right? Having less and less, more water-based and
Yep.
less heavy materials. So how do we increase performance? I think it's one of the key elements of bringing products to the market. But other than coatings, we're also looking, I think, very strongly into plastics and
Hmm.
say construction materials like concrete. With plastics, we already have some very interesting results here in Brazil. So we've been able to, with producing master batches with graphene. So again, additives in a way, so master batches with graphene, and with, as I told you earlier, with 0.5% of graphene or
Hmm.
half to 1% of the master batch itself, we're able to use 30% of the plastic in the packaging, right? So
Hmm.
we've just, our company makes the construction nails, and basically, as you can imagine, it's on a film pack, and the nail itself is a challenge of really puncturing or making holes in the packaging, right? We've been able to down gauge that packaging by 30% in the volume of plastic and thickness of the film, at the same
Yep.
time reducing the overall loss in packaging by in 40%. So
Mm.
basically, it got stronger. It's more robust packaging with much less plastic, right? So, and on top of that, there's an 8% gain in the productivity of the film manufacturer because of the thermal stability of graphene. He's able to produce films quicker. We've seen the same effect in stretch film and other film materials also in Brazil. So I think this year, next year, we'll probably see a huge increase, at least in Brazil, but also in other markets of really film packaging, really with 20% third less materials of higher performance, which is a huge increase. And then our next step is starting to look at different resins, so talking about PP and other materials, master batches with graphene, right?
Mm.
And I think, and then finally on the construction market, as we spoke earlier, I think one of the huge improvements we're seeing is we have now again a water-based also additive for concrete, which we're putting in the market second half of this year, so a couple of weeks, which basically with a small quantity, again, you can reduce a third of the cement in terms of the water on the concrete. So that's a huge improvement. Talking about lightweight, very lightweight structure. I talk about reducing the CO2 emissions overall coming from cement by reducing the overall value it has there. So I think it's also a very interesting project we're putting on the market. And I think I think these are very large industries, which very interesting hurdles we're bringing. So I think these are different tracks. They overall will bring more volume, or I think more usage of graphene. Back to your previous question, help really show the value of the material to the end customer and really get the industry moving quicker. So I think those are key benefits that we can expect and see the market in the next couple of months.
Good stuff there from Alex Correa, CEO of Gerdau Graphene. For anyone who wants to learn more about what you all are doing or potentially get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that? I'm guessing it's the website, but just plug whatever you want to plug to our listeners.
So social media, we're present in Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, so our website. But also, if you want some direct contact, you can always email us at info@gerdaugraphene.com, right? That's the quickest way.
Yep. And that's GERDAU, correct?
Correct.
Gerdau.
Graphene.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, this is where we will put a bow on things for today. For Alex, I'm Ben Dubose, news editor of the AMP Publications team. If you want more resources from us at an association level, you can go to amp.org. That's ampp.org. And for us at Coatings Pro Magazine, you can go to coatingspromag.com to read all sorts of industry news, technical articles, case studies, whatever you need as it pertains to the coatings industry and everything from certainly the contractor and applicator perspective, but all the way down the chain as well. We want to be the voice of the contractor and beyond. And so if you want more from us at Coatings Pro, again, coatingspromag.com is where you can get that. Again, for Alex, I'm Ben. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new Coatings Pro podcast.